With Chelsea, I mean, what are some of your favourite memories when you were playing for the football club?
Well, just like the first 5 years were unbelievable because, I mean, all the memories really revolve around just the atmosphere within my age group and basically the staff, which, so when I first went there, Dave Sexton was still the manager. I remember they had an Easter coaching clinic where he would stay on after all the pros left from their day's training and take all the sort of everyone that had been signed schoolboy. They'd be split up into groups. Dario Gradi, Ken Shiletto, Eddie McCready. I watched him do a session with the reserves. I was just sitting on the steps of the pavilion watching it. And then Eddie Mack went on to be the manager and literally got blood out of a stone. There was some decent talent there, but by and large, once they got promoted, it went downhill after that. There was a fallout between. There's different myth and legend revolves around the fallout between Eddie McCready and the club and directors. But anyway, he left, and then the club crashed and burned, sort of thing. After he left, people, bit of a playboy attitude. There were a few good professionals, but by and large, it was like Ken Bates summed it up really a little bit after I left. He said, like, you had the great Chelsea side of the 60s and 70s who thought that the club's training regime and fixtures revolved around their social life. and he said, and then the next generation tried to copy him and weren't as good. So,
didn't way before my time, but obviously players like Adam Hudson probably get away with, getting out in the town and then playing the day after. So.
Yeah, he was one of I won in my generation, Clive Walker. He was sort of it was a physical phenomenon really, because he was renowned for his athleticism and, apart from his playing ability, unbelievable engine. You know what I mean? So he could drink enough to sink a battleship and then run everyone into the ground the next day. Yeah. So that's how it was. Peter Osgood. You couldn't put a price on him today. You just wouldn't be able to put a price on him today. And, especially Ozzy. I mean, I only experienced him when he came back the second time, because he went from Chelsea to Southampton. Southampton, I think he went to Philadelphia in the US, then came back to the Bridge, and he was still phenomenal even then. Just a little bit, a little bit older and maybe a tad slower, but he'd got used to that anyway, having broken his leg as a 17-year-old. But he had everything.
John, who was your favourite player growing up? Obviously, from an early age, watching not just from the stands, but you obviously you watched football on TV, match of the day. You might have grew up, probably did sort of see maybe the best of best as well, which is something that is a privilege. Yeah. Who was the single most? Who was your foremost player growing up? Who did you look up to? Was it someone maybe off kilter that you related to because of your playing style? Was it the obvious one? Who did you look up to?
Well, I used to look at centre backs. Some centre backs I used to look at, and I used to think, well, if he can make it, I must have a chance. So a little bit sort of disparaging in that respect, but others I used to look at and admire. You can't help but, and a lot of my mates are West Ham supporters, you can't help but love the story associated to '66. Although I had a bit of a fallout later on with one of them, and people think obviously I'm the lunatic and I'm the crackerjack. And how can you question this and how can you question that? But I can assure you it's the truth. And that was Sir Geoff Hurst's training regime at Chelsea, who became the 7th manager I had in 6 seasons. But people like Bobby Moore, in answer to your question, Colin Todd, Roy McFarland, I would look at because they were, decent centre backs and very clever, read the game and very fair. They didn't go like smashing through the back of people. Probably best is the best player I saw. I remember going to, I think it was either New Year's or it might have been a Boxing Day fixture at Highbury. And I distinctly remember the score, Arsenal 2, Man United 2. So we actually turned up early enough to see them get off the coach, because that's how big they were. They were like film stars even back then, Charlton, Lord, Best, the Holy Trinity, as they call them up there, the Manx. But closer to home, my favourite players at Arsenal were. I used to enjoy watching George Armstrong, Charlie George, John Radford, and Peter Storey, who basically got me out of jail a bit further down the line because I made reference to him when I was castigated for some tackles I put in on a couple of Arsenal players for different reasons. Ironed a couple out, and so I made reference to it when there was complaints from Arsenal about the duplicity and hypocrisy and double standards in football. I said, I remember watching Peter Storey from the North Bank. I said, some of these tackles, if they was done on the street, they'd be classed as GBH. So don't begin to question me. They would have embarrassed Bruce Lee at the time. Yeah. All part of the duplicity, hypocrisy, and double standards in football. You know, it's all right when they do it, but when you retaliate and iron someone out, you can't do that. You know what I mean? It's like I've come across thousands of them, you know, begging back in my younger days, begging for a slap, but you just give them the benefit of the doubt.
Oh man, you just couldn't get away with that in this day and age. I mean, like, you know, just especially with VAR.
Just on that very quickly, John. So obviously, if you go back, if you wind back to football 15 years ago, obviously they always say Van Basten's injuries were a reason why the game became refereed better. Obviously, you know, you want the attacking players protected more. And I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, it's almost gone too far the other way, and the game's not flowing now, and it's almost a little bit too, everything's penalised, and they're trying to revert back to that. Do you think football's in serious danger of losing a lot of its appeal if it doesn't actually try and maybe tolerate a bit more physicality than it currently does?
Yeah, you're spot on what you said. I totally agree. I was going to actually chime in with what you just said about things swinging too far the other way, as opposed to your man just saying about it, you know, it wouldn't happen now. But it's like anything in football. It's like anything in life. You know what I mean? There's got to be an happy medium, and the pendulum swings, and then sometimes the pendulum swings too far the other way in favour of, you know, whatever category you know it falls into. Inevitably, whatever it is you're talking about, that the pendulum swings too far. Yeah, I think you can find an happy medium. There's no reason why you can't.
Yeah.
And normally people that have played the game, they know the difference between and I've done it myself, and I'm not ashamed of it because they asked for it at the time. I've never set out in any football match to purposely injure someone, but then if they start with their elbows, or they start, you know, flicking their head back, or they start, you've got a movement, whereas normally, like, they drop off and try and peel away out of your eye line if they're doing it 100% technically correct, to threaten the back. So then that pushes you back so you can keep them in your eye line, and then they come off sharp to receive the ball. But then they'll come up against centre forwards. They don't bother with that. They just walk backwards quickly and stamp on your toes. Well, I say, okay, you want to play them games? You play them games with me, I'll play them games with you. And then inevitably, the first chance I get, I'll fucking snap them in half. You know what I mean? Because I'm not having it. But if you want to set out and you want to play a technical, cerebral game, I'll do that as well. But what you've got to do, you've got to find an happy medium. It's right that there's more protection for forward players, because some of the tackles, like I said, in the 60s, 70s, and the early part of the 80s were just criminal. It was an out and out cheating. I was always taught to defend appropriately, and like I say, I would never get overly physical with someone unless they got overly physical with me. And there was no one in the game, absolutely no one you can name, that I was afraid of in life. You know what I mean? And I'm bravado. I mean, I'm fucking 62 next month. Do you know what I mean? But there was no one in the game that I was afraid of. But you know, when you come up against the Soonises and all that, they were just cowards tackles. It was like what it is. The game induced a state of paranoia. So if you're going into a 50-50, you're thinking, is the geezer going to do me? Is he going to go over the top? Am I going to get my leg broke here? So what happens is it changed the mindset, and then it's a case of like Ozzy used to say, get your retaliation in first. After Emily News broke his leg as a young footballer, so you had people going in, and they're called hard men. They're not hard men. They weren't hard men. You know what I mean? People like that. The real hard men are the ones that I came across who, like Ronnie Harris, who would train with an arthritic toe. And what I learned from Ronnie and from David A is never let them know when it's coming.
The following podcast is brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at wrestlingwithjohners.com.
Because I do listen to your podcast on a regular basis, and I know that you keep up to date with the game, and you talk about and you predict, and also agree with you about Xhaka and Harry Kane. If anyone wants to know what he has said, go listen to his podcast. I will put the details in the description. But I want to ask you quickly, we're about 3 games in now in the season. I just want to ask, who do you predict will win the league, and if you've got any predictions for relegation also?
Yeah, no. If you want to put my arm up my back, I mean, I still think it's far too early. You get a picture in any division whereabouts you're going to be around about October, unless someone goes on a crazy run. But if you're going to twist my arm up my back, I've said I've gone for them early, Man United, which was a couple of weeks ago, well before they got Ronaldo back. Which I mean, that could be one or two extremes. I think it could upset the apple cart, or it could be just an unbelievable signing. Yeah, whereby, you know, like a little bit. It's funny, it's a pun in itself. A little bit a la Cantona, where he's coming and he has a positive influence on everybody. He's a more mature player now. I think he's learned to share things more, rather than it all being about him like it was.
Is Ollie up to it, John?
Say again?
Is Ollie up to it, do you think? Do you think he's the man to make United take it?
Yeah, he's a manager who makes a few coaching points. But you can see that he delegates to the likes of Phelan and Carrick.
I think that he's got enough.
Why wouldn't he be? Yeah. No, listen, there's different. I think he's wonderfully understated.
Wonderfully understated, yeah.
Yeah,
so he doesn't get the credit, and he's a victim of perception, something that you've obviously.
Yeah, another one's Nuno. I mean, I said my surprise packages would be West Ham and Spurs. I thought Nuno was a good. I thought Nuno was a good shout, even though he was 4th, 5th choice. But that's the way the game goes sometimes, and it can happen by fluke. Well, Chelsea, I've got to have a little like rethink about having predicted United, because when I was talking about it, they were actually in the middle of doing the deal for Lukaku. I think he'll add a new dimension. I mean, they are like everything: physically powerful, passing movement. He'll bring the lot, you know. He'll add to the ingredients. So I think it's out of Chelsea sitting United. I've gone for United just because I like to be different, and I like to be a little bit unpredictable, and I like, you know, it'd be nice to, for Ollie, it'd be the first title in 30
It's nice to actually hear someone, because he gets a lot of stick. It's nice to actually hear someone not only rooting for Ollie, but actually, you know, believing in him as well. I think that's, you know, it's
you've always got to listen. You've always got to read and look deeper. You've always got to, like Arteta, he's giving out veiled messages all over the gaff. And I, as an ex-manager, as an ex-player, as someone's been inside a football club or football environment for 25 years, until I stopped staffing courses for the FA, because I got leapfrogged for a monitor's job in 1997 by school teachers who'd never laced a pair of boots on, and then asked to go and do it on top of the 2-week qualification. There was another 2-week qualification, so the full badge, then the conversion to the UEFA A. Having staffed courses for 9 years and generated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, they wanted me to stop doing the knowledge, not get any dole money, quit me 3 part-time jobs to go and do a 2-week teaching course at Lilleshall, right, to basically regurgitate stuff that I'd already knew, and that I'd already put across in the previous 9 years, going over old ground. I couldn't afford it. So I just said, you know what with school teachers taking the job that I should have had, fuck it, that's me done. And I walked out. I turned it in. So if I'd have worked my way up and kept my mouth shut, instead of speaking up for everybody else about the flat balls and the rip bibs and not enough cones and not enough expenses, then I might have still been at the FA. But they're going like, oh, Sits, can you have a word about the expenses? Can you have a word about cutting back on this? Can you have a word about the equipment? Can you have a word about it? Yeah, all right, okay. I think you're right. So I spoke up about it. If I'd have kept my mouth shut, I might have been higher up at the FA. Who knows? You know what I mean? But they wouldn't come across the original idea if it fucking headbutted them. You know what I mean? But so I was always going to be on the periphery or an outcast. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Very quickly, John, just on predictions and managers and stuff. Obviously, you're an England fan. Just give me a quick overview in terms of, you know, Southgate's obviously done well on paper, but there's still doubts about whether he again can get England to play. Do you think the fact that we can't keep the ball and we struggle to manage a game, is that down to Southgate's coaches? Is that just down to the fact we haven't got the midfielders? And do you think Southgate's the man to make that final step as well?
Two things quickly, right?
Yeah.
The question before, top three, United, Chelsea, City, not necessarily in that order. Bottom three, from the Ministry of State in the obvious, Norwich, Watford, possibly Palace or Brighton. Possibly Newcastle. I think it possibly Southampton. So the last place will be out of maybe them four.
Yeah.
In answer to your I could have been very disparaging, maybe borderline disrespectful, but I caught the disease of positivity. I just went along with the flow. I went with the flow of everybody else after the defeat in the Euros final at Wembley. I tried to be upbeat and positive about it and look at the pluses, but I still think we're even though it was on penalties, I still think we're a long way in terms of how it should be from achieving anything. So that's not I mean, he's saying last night, Stuart Pearce is an ex-teammate and someone who got on with him from Euro 96, etc. He's a very likable guy, which he is. And then you've got Adrian Durham saying he's a very likable guy and he talks a good game and he's a good manager and he takes a keen interest in his players and he comes across as a decent football man and a decent coach. And Adrian Durham said he's like a statesman. He's like a statesman. As he raised his voice as he said it, he's like a statesman. Well, I don't want a statesman. I just want a winner. I don't want a fucking geezer who might run for prime minister and get a knighthood. I just want a winner. I just want someone who's going to be like I said they should be, proactive during a game, not reactive.
Yep.
Someone who's got balls like Mancini had, who won it for Italy or turned the tide for Italy and got the equaliser. I want someone who's like, now the penny's dropped after I've been saying it since I was 28. I'm 62 next month, like I keep saying. I said it at 28. We're not tactically adaptable enough. The syllabus is too rigid. There's too many things like this and this missing out of the syllabus when coaches get qualified. Then I said the same again. That was in 1990. Then I said the same again when we converted to the UEFA in 1997. Right? So they're like, who the fuck is this geezer? He slid down from one of the best academies in Europe, if not the world at the time, Chelsea, under Sexton, McCready, Grady and Shalato, right down to the fourth division with Leyton Orient. So he's a nobody. You understand? Well, I'm not a nobody. I've thought about the game and I know as much about the game and I can talk more in depth about the game and be more profound about the game than any fucking pundit on the telly you care to name. You understand? Now, the bottom line is you're dismissed because you're not an high-profile face. You're not an high-profile name. But I've been saying all these things have been missing since I started taking my badges at 28. Then I went through all the prep courses. And then just before I was 30, I did the full badge in 1990. You understand? Then again in 1997. So I know all these ingredients that have been missing for decades. Not a few weeks, not a few months, decades.
Yeah.
You understand? So,
The following podcast is brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at wrestlingwithjohners.com.